Right, if you guys would like to join me here at the table. Well, the idea of this session is to come up with a few suggestions and tips from experienced journalists, all of whom have actively covered climate change in the last years and decades, actually. Together, I think we're looking at a substantial number of years of experience in covering climate change here at the table. On my left is Tasha Eichenseher. She works with the National Geographic Society as a science producer and editor. Tasha, can you tell us a little bit about the way you see climate change and what it means for your work at National Geographic?
Sure. Can you all hear me? Yeah? No? So many of you know National Geographic. We have a 100-something-year tradition of giving science, environment, and cultural coverage to the world. And we, our primary media outlet is the magazine with a circulation of 5 million. And I work on the digital side of things. So that means I'm managing our environment content online. That includes some of the magazine content. It also includes a lot of educational material. We have a daily news service where we run 3 to 4 stories a day, and various other. We have blogs. We have a green guide, which helps you sort of wade through all this greenwashing to help you be a better green consumer. But our take on climate, basically, we aim to translate science to the public and help the public understand these complicated issues. We don't take sides. We try not to be an activist organization. We want to maintain our credibility. So when it comes to climate, we really are just seeking out the science and helping interpret it for the public. Does that answer the question?
Yes, you yourself have a scientific background.
Yes.
How did you move from that background into journalism?
Well, I'd always had an interest in journalism, and I did a master's in environmental science related to water, actually. And my master's in science was actually a way to help me be a better journalist. So.
Good. On your left, we have Gerald Traufetter, I should say, from Germany. He is the science and technology editor of Der Spiegel, a weekly magazine, a big weekly magazine in Germany. Gerald, tell us your climate story.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm one of 15 staff science writer in our magazine. It's a major one in Germany. We sell roughly 1 million copies every week, every Monday. I started covering climate change about 10 years ago. I cover a lot on polar research. This was my introduction to the whole topic, and yeah, it got more and more important, the topic in these 10 years. I work for the magazine, which is actually probably, which sounds really fossil to you. It's printed on paper and sold at newspaper stands. But we also have a cooperation with our website, Spiegel Online, which became the major news website in Germany. And whenever I do articles now, I also try to do more than only writing, but taking pictures, taking film snaps, so that I can present this background material once the article is published. So on Monday, the magazine is at the newsstand, and during the week there will be interviews, there will be small films shown from the places I travel to and the people I talk to. So we are trying to cope with the modern times.
You told me this morning you've traveled quite a bit as well, also to the Arctic and the Antarctic. So you've witnessed basically yourself the impact of climate change. Has that influenced your attitude towards this climate beat?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the polar regions, they are the front line of climate change. So whatever happens there is probably the real first signs of climate change. So last year I was in Greenland, in Ellesmere Island in Canada, really talking to Inuit, to people there on the field, and they were telling me about changes that are quite remarkable. Those changes are already perceived by industry, so when it comes to resources, yeah, it's a kind of irony that on the one hand climate change opens up the waters in the Arctic, and on the other hand this will fuel, by extracting oil and gas, this will fuel again climate change. So these were remarkable journeys, certainly.
On my right here is Ramesh, Jaura. I must admit I was still wearing diapers when he already was working as a journalist in the 1960s. You were covering the upheaval in the eastern part of Europe, and you now work for Inter-Press Service. Is climate the story of our generation in a way that the 1960s in Eastern Europe was the story of that generation?
I would say very much, yes. You're right. I was first in Eastern Europe covering the Prague Spring, which probably some of you have read, led to a disaster. But let's come back to the current issues. I have been with IPS-Inter Press Service, which is an international news agency with headquarters in Rome, but regional centers in Africa, Asia, Latin America, North America, and Europe. I have been covering climate issues since the very beginning. You know that there was a conference which was called Earth Summit, or UN Conference on Environment and Development, which for the first time established a link between environment and development, not the other way around, development and environment, which since then has come to be known as the mother of environmental conventions. And the Climate Change Convention is born out of that Rio Conventions. And there's the CCD, which is the combating desertification, and then there's the Convention of Biological Diversity. So I've been involved with the climate change conferences almost right from the beginning, and including Kyoto and including Bali, which has been quite an experience. I don't have a scientific background. It's not the only thing I cover. Like any professional journalist, you keep on hopping from one issue to the other. But somehow this issue has come to stay with me in my mind and in my other activities. IPS itself started focusing on development and environmental issues, so that climate change, it's very second nature as far as the coverage by IPS of climate change issues is concerned.
Would it be fair to say that IPS has been created out of frustration with the way that Western Northern media have covered development issues?
Oh yes. Indeed. It was created back in 1964 with a view to giving voice to the voiceless. In those days it meant the people in the South. South is not Southern Europe, it is the developing part of the world which still accounts for 2/3 of humankind. We always forget that, but it's 2/3 of humankind. So it was set up with a view to giving voice to the people in the countries of the South, in the developing countries, which did not have a voice at that time. The mainstream media did not bother about covering the real issues involved. They were interested mainly in scandals, and that was all.
Okay, thank you, Ramesh. And then a final participant in the session is Asbjorn Jorgensen, lecturer at the Danish School of Media and Journalism in Arhus, or Arhus?
Actually in Arhus.
Arhus,
okay.
Yes. And you have a background yourself as a technology writer.
Yes. Yeah.
What role is climate